Once a man came to the Chafetz Chaim, and he came crying. He said, Rebbe, everything that I tried in life went bad. Rebbe, I'm begging you, give me a beracha that I'll have what to live on. Please, Rebbe, a beracha that I'll have what to live on. The Chafetz Chaim began to cry. And the Chafetz Chaim looked at the man and he said, I'm waiting for the day that a person should come knocking down my door and he should cry in front of me and say, Rebbe, give me a beracha that I'll have what to die on. What do we have to show for the life that we're living? You know, maybe that's what the Seforno was telling us. Yaakov Avinu was correcting Paro. You know, that legendary encounter, that first time that Yaakov Avinu met Paro, Yaakov Avinu comes down to Mitzrayim and he comes in front of Paro. And Paro, he sees in front of him a man that looks so old. Paro asks Yaakov Avinu, Kama yemesh notecha? How many are your years? How old are you? Yaakov Avinu, instead of simply just telling him the number of his age, he begins to tell him, I had some difficult years. I had some good years. And all in all, my years did not reach the years of my father and my grandfather. Says the Seforno, Yaakov Avinu, Paro asked you, how old are you? Why such a long and drawn out answer? Simply just say the number of your age? No. Says Seforno, Yaakov Avinu was coming to teach Paro a lesson about life. He was coming to correct Paro. He was coming to tell Paro, when you see an old man, it doesn't mean that he lived long. It simply means that he existed for a long period of time. What does it mean to live? Living is not existing. To be alive is to be productive. Hayim. Hayim means not living, not just simply breathing, but Hayim means alive. It means to be vibrant. It means to be productive. Think back to their life. Think back to their challenges and how they overcame. Think back to those unbelievable tests that your loved one went through in life and how they shined through. It's those experiences, it's those memories, it's those life lessons that will never die. Their life and what they stood for will continue to live on in you. In you. Ay sadikim b'mitatam nikraim hayim. The righteous, the tzaddikim, they continue to live on even after death. Tzaddikim, not just the righteous, but the righteous moments of life, the moments you really lived, those vibrant moments of greatness that every Jew has in life, those moments live on through you. Aye, those memories. I remember years ago, I grew up very close to my grandfather, and wow, what a storyteller he was. And he told me back about the old country, and he told me how difficult it was to live as a Jew in those years. He told me all the trials and tribulations that the Jews lived through and how they persevered, and the strength that they showed was like beyond imagination. And I remember my grandfather telling me so many unbelievable stories, and with each one came a life lesson that one could never forget. And I remember growing up, and I kept telling myself, one day I got to go over to my grandfather's house with a tape recorder. We're talking about years ago, with a tape recorder, and I'm going to tape him. And I'm going to get each and every one of these stories. And I can't let these stories die. Because these stories really make up his life of what he lived, what he stood for. And I'm going to tell it to my kids. And I'm going to have my kids tell it to their kids, to know that they had a wonderful grandfather, that they had a wonderful family member, They had somebody at home from their own backyard that they could emulate and they could remember, look up to, and to continue to live on their legacy and what they stood for. I can't tell you how young and foolish I was, procrastinating, thinking, okay, next time I'm going to bring the tape recorder in, and next time I'm going to bring the tape recorder in. And because of that, some of those stories still stay with me. But now over the years, they're somewhat vague. And I try to give over to my kids a little bit of the memories that I have. But I don't do justice to the way he gave it over and to the life that he lived. And again, years later, you'd think you'd learn from your own mistakes. So I come to Eretz Yisrael, and there I'm learning in Eretz Yisrael, and I became very close with my grandmother, Alea Shalom, a true Sadeket. She was from the women of Morocco, but from the old generation. She was the women that they used to tell stories about. They used to sit over the pot and cook while singing and reciting Tehillim, asking Borei Olam to make sure that the food should come out good enough to be Oneg Shabbat for Shabbat Kodesh. Oh, these are different people. These are different generations. But how could we let them go? And every Friday night, I used to walk from Yeshivat Itri, which is in Talpiot, on one side of Jerusalem, all the way to the area of Sanhedria Murchevet, which is the opposite side of Jerusalem, over an hour and a half's walk, just to relish and to sit in those Friday nights and to hear just another story, another life experience, another moment from the old country. I remember then, already older, I said to myself, no, this time I'm not going to make the same mistake again. I'm not going to let that generation pass away without grabbing a piece of them, to keep them alive, to keep their memories alive. And each and every time I said to myself, at the end of this month, right after yeshiva is over, I'm going to go back. This time, I'm going to tape her on CD. I'm going to have everything down pat. She was a treasure of memories, of stories, of Gidolim, of Sadiqim, of yesteryear, and simply the greatness of even the simple Jew. But it was only Friday nights that I sat with her, unable to record her, obviously, at that time. And sure enough, again, she passed on, and she took with her a treasure, a wealth that till today I mourn. I wish I could have kept it alive to give it to my kids so that the next generation should know about their family, their members, who they come from, and what they're made of, and the potential and the greatness inside of them, just like from the people that they came from. Those memories, they live on. And these wonderful, great people that we continue to mourn, they started something. And we, the next generation, whether it be a parent, whether it be a family member, there's always some moment that we can take home and keep alive. And we can have it live on, and we could continue that legacy. A lot of times they started the work. They taught us the teachings. Now it's time for us to live it. Now it's time for us to continue it. I have to share with you this story. This is from the heart. But I want you to hear this well. In the 1950s, the situation in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, although at that time the persecution of the Holocaust was beginning somewhat to be something in the past, although something like that one can never forget. Oh no, we should never forget. However, in the 1950s, the Jews of Yerushalayim began somewhat to live again. There's one problem though. The famine. There was such a hunger at that time in Israel that there was nothing to eat. How so? To the extent, I just want to describe to you what a Shabbat table in Jerusalem in the 1950s looked like. Wine, they had barely a few drops. Chalot didn't exist. The bread was just a few crumbs of bread. On their table, there was simply vegetables and a little soup, meat, chicken, oneg Shabbat. No, that just wasn't. There was such a hunger, such a scarcity of food. It was at that time that the people couldn't believe it when one day a guy comes into shul in Yerushalayim and he announces, he says, people, I'm making a siyum tomorrow night. And I'm telling you, there's going to be so much food. I want you to come and celebrate with me. I finished the Masechet. Come to my siyum. And I do tell you, there's going to be a lot of food. When the people heard this, they heard siyum, kol hakavod, but they heard the food. They said, we're coming. It's amazing how they say when people heard and the word got out that there was food at the coming siyum, people came from all over Jerusalem in droves. Mothers carrying their children just to give them a meal. That's the situation. That's how bad it was. The rabbi, he comes in, he looks around, he invites everybody into his home. And there he turns around and he says, come, take a look. They look at the table and they see that on the table there was every possible food that they once remembered existed. Food that they haven't seen in years. Oh, there was entrees and there was salads. There was cups of wine filled to the brim, along with the chicken that was being brought out, and then after that the meat. They just could not believe their eyes. A lavishing meal. People looked at the Messiah, the rabbi that was making the siyum, and they said, tell us, where did you get this food from? How did you afford this food? He said to the people, I spent my entire life saving up my pennies just for this siyum. The people looked at him and said, it looks like a Sheva Brachot. To us, this looks better than the weddings that we make for our daughters. What Masechet did you finish? He looked at them and he said, I finished Masechet Moed Katan. Moed Katan. The whole 18, 19 pages. And this is the siyum that you're making on one of the smallest Gemarot, smallest Masechtot in Shas. And this is the lavishing siyum, fit for a king, something greater than a wedding. The people looked at him. They said, can you imagine if we finished Ketubot? What he would have made? This is for Moed Katan? He says, yes. Wait, let me make the siyum. And I'm going to tell you the story behind the siyum. He went and he finished the Gemara, made the siyum, and they began to bring out the food, and the people were blown away. And then he began to speak. And before he said a word, he looked around the room in silence. And suddenly the people saw that he started to pull up his sleeve, and he showed on his arm, there were the numbers. The numbers, those numbers that we all know, of a concentration camp survivor. And he turns to the people and he says, I was in one of the worst concentration camps. And at that time, there was a man there that everybody called him the Meshugana of the camp. The Meshuga, the Mejnun case. He was the crazy guy of the camp. Now, people thought due to the torture and the horrific, horrible things they went through, that this guy lost his mind. And the reason is because this guy, he talked to himself day and night. Wherever he went, he talked to himself. Out in the fields, in hard labor, he's talking to the shovels, he's talking to the rocks, he's talking to himself. And wherever he went, day and night, constantly, consistently, he doesn't stop talking to himself. And he says, we all thought he was crazy. He lost his mind. He went off. He totally lost it. Until one night. He says, one night, he says, you know, in the barracks, in the concentration camp, they had bunk beds. A lower and an upper bed. He says, I slept in the lower bed. And this guy, the Meshuga, the crazy guy in the camp that wouldn't stop talking, he slept on the upper bed. And believe me, it wasn't easy. Because all night, like all day, he wouldn't stop talking to himself. Sometimes he kept me up all night. Till one night, he leans down from his bed and he actually looks me right in the eye. And he says to me, You think I'm crazy? I know everybody in the camp thinks I'm crazy. You think I'm crazy? I'm not. Do you know what it is that I am saying to myself day and night? Everywhere I go, in this terrible place, I am reviewing the entire Shas to myself. Gemara, Rashi, Tosafot. From the very beginning, going through Shas, and I'm almost finished. I'm about to make a siyum in the heart of Gehenna. I'm about to be Mesayem Shas. I have one more Mesechet left. All I have now to finish is the Gemara Mesechet Moed Katan. I don't think I'm going to make it. I'm asking you. You're going to live. I might not make it. If I don't make it out of here, promise me that you're going to finish the Siyum Hashas that I was almost about to make, even in a concentration camp. Yeah, because these Nazis, they can take my body, but they're not going to take my life. They can torture me, but my neshama, my Torah is going to live on. That they could never stop. My Torah, my Shas, is going to live on through you. Please, I have one Mesechet left. Can you finish the Shas that I almost finished here in concentration camp? He says, I looked at him. He says, my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it. I promised him I definitely will. And that night, the man passed away with his lips slowly coming to a halt, saying his last words. And almost the entire Shas went with him. But then I remembered my promise. And I did live to get out of the concentration camp. And we were liberated sometime after that. And I was lucky enough to come here to Eretz Yisrael. And I promised myself, as I promised him, I'm going to finish the Shas that he started. I'm going to finish that last Masechet. I'm going to give him the siyum of the entire Shas by finishing Moed Katan. He's going to live on through the Masechet that I just finished. When the people heard this, he looked at them and said, now you understand why the siyum. It's not just a siyum. It's a siyum hashas, but it's a siyum of a life that had so much to show for it. A Jew that lived in an incredible, productive, and vibrant way. We could continue to live their lives and bring it and continue on. How important. The Mishnayot, it allows them to continue to live. How important we make classes in the memories of those that were deceased. Again, the Torah enables them and their teachings and what they stood for to live on. But more than anything, focus on their lives, their teachings and their lessons. Yaakov Avinu lo met. You know why? Because look what he gave over to his children, to his family, and how they lived his life and continued it till today. We're continuing to live the legacy, the greatness of the Avot. They're alive in us. And so too, the greatness of every Jew. You can continue to have it live on in you.